Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, back with the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. Had a few minutes here to record a couple of videos, getting ready to work on some really cool projects with my brother Eric Wolf and with Paul Menta as well, and just wanted to answer the few questions I got this week. Also update you guys, so there are more copies of the Almanac on their way. They are supposed to be here on the 13th of this month. I believe copies are still available on the website right now. Of course, when you buy your copy, you get the digital copy too. The books turned out awesome. Like I said in previous videos, there's things that I can improve in those books. There's no doubt about that, 100%. And I'm getting there, right? Writing an almanac is not something that I'm uniquely qualified to do, and so I'm learning as I go, and I think it'll get better over the years. But I'm really happy with the way that this year's turned out. I think it's a great edition, a lot of good information in there, and you know, other than the calendar pages, a lot of what is in the 2025 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac is evergreen material. You know, so at some point in time down the road, I've talked about, you know, we may take some of that material and republish that into sort of an omnibus volume every several years or something. But the one thing I'm not going to do is that once the yearly almanac, you know, ceases publication for that year, it doesn't get reprinted. So I probably have a few extra copies of 2024 laying around. I'll probably keep a few extra copies of 2025 laying around, and maybe from time to time down the years, through the years, those will get released as sort of vintage copies, and what there is of them there is. I think it's kind of a cool idea, right? They're a limited thing for that year, and I don't know, I like stuff like that. So anyways, let's jump into your questions. As always, please send me your questions at bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, YouTube comments below, or via any of my social media. Make sure you check out oldhomesteaddc.com. Our tasting room is now officially open, serving the world's first and only sunshine spirits made with hand roasted and hand malted sunflowers, and all the various flavors that you love. We've also got the Black Forest Spirits line made with local Black Forest of Indiana peaches and apples. There's absinthe coming. There is a very cool traditional liqueur called the 9 Herb Charm that is out there on the shelves right now, that I made for people like you who really love the art of distillation, and those complexity and the approaches being more spiritual. That is for you guys, not for everyone, for sure. So be sure to come check it out. Anyways, here we go. I really appreciate your advice regarding the specific gravity of my whiskey mashes. I've already taken action to lower the specific gravity 10 points. My new questions are somewhat related. I would appreciate your thoughts on them. I just received a beautiful copper onion head, see the picture, and I have just run a spirit run for bourbon that I mashed high with it. The low wines were not high in ABV, however, nor low, 5.5 gallons at 28% ABV, which is just about perfect in my honest opinion. With the onion head, the starting ABV from the still was predictably high, 83% ABV. However, the high proof distillate just kept coming. It only dipped under 80% ABV until after 2.5 liters, 0.7 gallons had been produced, and it kept going high until a sudden drop from 75% to 69% between 5.5 liters / 1.4 gallons. I've never seen a drop quite so dramatic. Is this normal? Is this related to the added passive reflux in the onion, or does it have to do with my distilling process? I was distilling slow, real slow, because I wanted to be able to make good cuts. Should I be a little bit more brave on the throttle when I have the onion head on? Thank you again, Alan, for taking your time and helping out with your expertise and being patient. Great questions, and you are on the right track as to the causes. So a few things can cause this. One would be, you know, the higher alcohol percentage of your mash, or higher potential alcohol. The second thing is the onion head does have a lot of passive reflux, especially if there's any cool air movement at all around that onion head. That's one of its purposes, right? But you have to match that with your speed. If you're running slow, you're going to have a lot more reflux. The same as, you know, if you're actually running active reflux, you're running a little bit slower in order to up that proof and that purity of that spirit. So my advice, and I always tell people this, so, you know, your retention temperature of your spirit matters. So 68 to 72 degrees is a good indicator that you're running where you need to be at. But also, a lot of people will tell you online, and it's not true, to run at a drip or whatever, or a broken stream. You know, run, you know, depending on the size of your still, for most small setups about the size of a pencil lead, and steady, right? And not falling back on itself but coming straight out. That's about the right speed in general to run. You want some reflux, but you don't need a whole lot with most products, unless they just really need to be cleaned up. But you've unlocked a hidden trick of your onion head, which is that you can have some somewhat controllable reflux and clean up some dirtier products when you want to by running a little slower. The other thing that can do this is if your still is, let's say, only 3/4 full or less than 3/4 full, right? Now you have that much more airspace that everything has to travel through, that much more surface area, that much more resistance in terms of gas, etc. You can force reflux that way as well. So yeah, you're absolutely on the right path, and keep up the good work, man. Keep the questions coming. Love answering them. So let's see what else we got here. I got a couple more, I know. So from Ron, thanks Alan for your time and effort to educate us. I'm referencing a video from a few years ago. For a flat bottom propane fired still, you mentioned macerating your fruit for a week in a neutral spirit before final distillation. In my case, a sugar wash. My question is, can I macerate in a stripping run, or do I need to clean this up as much as possible before a spirit run? I also have a thumper. I'm making 21-gallon wash and have a 10-gallon still. All right, so there's a few different things you can do here, and it depends on what you want to do. So you could do it in low wine, and I have done this sometimes for gins. For example, the AJ Schreiner gin that I did, we wanted the rye whiskey base to come through, so we macerated everything in low wines so that we'd be able to hold on to some more of that rye whiskey base coming across. Now remember, you're going to lose a little bit of flavor from whatever you've macerated in there, because you still got to make a heads cut, and it's also going to complicate your heads cut because the aromas are going to be thrown a little bit differently, the oils are going to be acting differently, the azerotypes are going to change, etc. But if you want some of that base material to come across, you certainly can do this in low wines. Of course, you could also macerate into your thumper, more of an infusion really than anything else if you wanted to on a single pass run. So it can be a little bit of all of the above. It certainly doesn't have to be neutral. It's just typically for something like, you know, if I wanted to do a brandy Geist, what I would almost always do is make something fairly neutral, like an oat, sugar, raisin wash, and then double distill that, clean it up, then macerate it and redistill it. Or I might even try to make a wash or a wine from what I want to make the Geist out of, double distill it, clean it up, macerate it, redistill it. But again, it's all about whatever you want to do. I've also done absinthe this way. When I was at Copper and Kings, all of our absinthes were grape brandy based, Muscat, and I believe we did some out of Colombard as well, if I'm remembering correctly. So those were all macerated in low wines. And again, you just got to remember to cut your you know, your heart, or cut your heads and all that stuff as you would on a double pot still run. And it can be a little bit more complicated because of the conflicting flavors, etc., coming across, and things that you may or may not be losing. So looks like I got one more here. So let's see. All right. So, hey Alan, my question concerns the redistillation of faints. If I'm not mistaken, you once mentioned that you add the heads and tails to the stripping run rather than to the spirit run, as traditionally done in Scottish distilleries. What are the pros and cons of these approaches? Obviously, with several repeated distillations, the concentration of impurities increases, which in turn raises the risk of contaminating the heart cut. But this is also true for the stripping run, although due to greater dilution, the ethanol yield may be better. What is your opinion and practice regarding this matter? And as always, thank you for your enlightening work. Thank you for the comments. So what I typically do if I'm going to rerun heads, they go back into the stripping run. And the reason for that is because most of those impurities, most of those things you don't want, acetaldehyde, ethyl acetate, etc., they actually break down with heat cycling. So you're not building up those impurities like you think you would. You can recycle those heads multiple times into that stripping run, and you're not really going to see a net gain in volume of heads that you're throwing out, or four shots that you're throwing out, or anything of that nature, or those impurities over time necessarily. You know, this is to an extent. I mean, you could, at Spirits of French Lick, for example, sometimes I might collect heads and rerun them. I think typically 5 or 6 times is what I was doing. At Old Homestead, I don't collect heads at all. I don't bother. I'm making an American style whiskey. It's a little cleaner, a little more elegant, so I'm not trying to hold on to all that stuff. Now the tails, I always put into my doubling run every single time. If I've got tails, I hold on to those. They go back into the doubling run the next day, and because that's where a lot of your flavor and your consistency and your mouthfeel and all that stuff is. And the other thing I would say about Scottish distilleries, so Scotch distillers have been pretty quiet about a lot of their methods over the years, and there's sort of this idea that they all use a lot of the same methods, but I can tell you from having talked to many distillers in Scotland that it's not the case, that they have a lot of their own tips and tricks, and some of them put heads and tails in different places. Some don't recycle heads at all. It really just depends on what they want to do in the style of spirits that they want to make. For me, again, if I'm saving heads, they'll go back into the stripping run, or they might go into the fermenter. You can also feed your heads back to the yeast. The yeast will break down acetaldehyde and ethyl acetate, and it actually works as a little bit of a nutrient. Now, that only works to the extent that you don't want to drive the alcohol up crazy high and kill the yeast off, obviously. Tails, always back to the doubling run. So, all right, guys, listen, I'm working on the new Almanac now. I'm working on a couple of other books. I'm trying to get Sacred and Profane podcast back up and going a little bit here and there. Trying to get Distillers Talk back on track, etc. But at some point in time in the next couple months, I might announce a little spirits competition for you guys. I think it could be fun. I think you guys talked me into it. So, but anyways, don't forget to order your copy of the 2025 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac over at thealchemistcabinet.com, and check out oldhomesteaddc.com for all the news from Old Homestead Distillery. Love y'all. Later.